Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Distinguished guests with all protocol observed, representative of CSOs from North Africa, Nord-Africaine feminists and activists aspiring for change. It is with a great pleasure and honor to launch this important conversation, bringing together North Africa youth for a Beijing+30 Baraza. This meaningful intergenerational conversation for the Beijing+30 and process and the CSW 69 is organized by a leading umbrella African feminist organization, Nalafem collective, led by a strong advocate for youth and women's rights in the continent, Mrs. Ayeshabi. Please join me to applaud Mrs. Ayeshabi for this wonderful initiative. This is certainly organized by the will of several partners, including UN Women, Generation Equality Action Coalition, and feminist movements and leadership, Politics for Her, a Climate Syrians, Jussour Youth Organization, Young Arab Feminist, Tunisian Ra'idat for Equality, International Center for Organization, for Diplomacy, Malikat Safety Center, and Her Right to Education Initiative. Thank you all for willing to be part of this process and raise North African women's rights voices high in the international policy agenda. Please note that simultaneous translation is available in Arabic, French, and English, so make sure that you use the appropriate channel to follow this conversation. So certainly, this conversation will enable young feminist voices from North Africa and the diaspora to access information, identify gaps, and drive accountability in the Beijing+30. North Africa young feminists will certainly be briefed, and also their representation will be enhanced, more specifically feminist youth-led organizations and their insights and priorities in North Africa's national and regional assessment will be heard, contributing to transformative outcomes in alignment with the Beijing+30 agenda. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please let me introduce our distinguished guests for the opening remarks. Of course, we have Mrs. Ayeshabi. You all know her. She is a Pan-African feminist and diplomat who devoted her time, energy, and efforts for women and girls' rights and empowerment in Africa. She has been a prominent voice and figure in the Tunisian Revolution, and she served as the first ever African Union Special Envoy on Youth and the youngest diplomat at the chairperson's cabinet at the African Union. Welcome, Mrs. Aya. Of course, we have Her Excellency Hajar Sharif, who is from Libya, and she's one of the UN 12 champions for women, peace and security, and human rights. She's a council member of the Nalafem and co-founder of Together We Built It. She's a human rights advocate. She's a notable advocate for women and youth participation in peace-building efforts in Libya. She has been selected by the UN Secretary General to serve as a member of the advisory group of experts for the progress study of youth, peace, and security mandated by the UN Security Council Resolution 2050. We have Her Excellency, Mrs. Saïda Agrebi from Tunisia, who is a member of the Economic, Social, and Cultural Council of the African Union, representing North Africa. She's also a Pan-African Parliament representing Tunisia. She's a director of the Bureau of the Arab Working Women of the Arab Labor Organization. She has been director of communication at the National Office for Family and Population, then deputy director, and then deputy director general of the Office of Tunisians Abroad, and she has been elected member of the Tunisian Parliament. We have from Morocco, Mrs. Yasmina Ben Sliman, and she's founder of Politics for Her, a non-profit organization that advocates for a greater political participation and leadership for women while promoting gender equality in governance and politics. She's also a feminist activist and a women empowerment coach. And later, we'll be having the privilege to have Mrs. Simone Elosoho. I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Olonia. She is Regional Governance Advisor at UN Women Regional Office for the Arab States. She is a strategic thinker with over 25 years of experience in international development. She was previously the Deputy Regional Director for 2 UN Women Regional Office in Africa. So welcome, distinguished guests. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Mrs. Aya Shabi, who will give us a broad perspective about this conversation, its objectives, and its outcomes. You have the floor, ma'am.
شكرا كريمة نسيت تقدم روحها. كريمة رانم من المغرب ورئيسة المركز الدولي للدبلوماسية نسوية وقائدة وصديقة. شكرا كريمة، دائما حاضرة. مرحبا بكم في برازة أو استشارة شباب شمال أفريقيا بيجين مع 30. أود أن أشكر شركائنا الذين نظموا معنا هذه البرازة في وقت قياسي، يعني في ظرف أسبوع تقريبا. يعني كريمة قالت الليست متاع الشركاء، لكن أريد أن أعيد لأنه كانت فعلا تجربة في وقت قياسي. رائدات التونسيات للمساواة، منظمة جسر، مركز دبلوماسي دولي، Climate Sirens, Politics for Her، شابات العربيات النسويات، مركز السلامة ملكة، مبادرة حقها في التعليم، وكذلك شركائنا ممولين التحالف العامل التابع للأمم المتحدة للحركات والقيادات النسوية، هيئة الأمم المتحدة للمرأة، وصندوق تنمية المرأة الأفريقية. لا يمكن تحقيق أي شيء بدون شراكات، فيعني شركائنا خاصة النسويات الشابات سوف يقودون المحادثات. نحن فقط هنا لتسهيل أو تيسير الفضاء. نعلم جميعا أننا نعيش تاريخيا في أفريقيا ما بعد الاستعمار، حيث انفصال شمال وجنوب الصحراء تم بسبب انقسامات زائفة مثل اللغة والعرق والتنمية إلى آخره. وهذا الانقسام الذي يعود جذوره إلى التاريخ الاستعماري استخدم في كثير من الأحيان كاستراتيجية للتقسيم وللغزو. ولكن شمال أفريقيا هي أفريقيا والسكان الأصليون لشمال أفريقيا هم أمازيغ، وهي منطقة تم تعريبها أو استعرابها ويمتد تاريخ الفتح الإسلامي العربي فيها منذ القرن السابع. فنحن لدينا جميعا تاريخ قبل الاستعمار، وهو تاريخ يوحدنا مع أفريقيا لا يفرقنا عنها. النضال من أجل التحرير في الستينات والخمسينات هو تاريخ يوحدنا مع أفريقيا لا يفرقنا عنها. لذا دعونا لا نكون جيلا يخلد هذا الإرث الاستعماري، دعونا نجعل اندماج القارة الأفريقية بكاملها وبشمالها أولوية لنا. نحن قارة واحدة، تاريخنا واحد ومصيرنا واحد، وفي هذا المستقبل النسوي الذي نريد والذي نبنيه في شمال أفريقيا لا مكان لكراهية الأفارقة أو أفروفوبيا أو العنصرية. طبعا ستظل وحدتنا الأفريقية موضع اختبار، لكن أعتقد أن جيلنا يجب أن يسمو فوق الانقسام الذي فرضه العالم علينا عرقيا، ثقافيا، اقتصاديا، سياسيا. علينا فعلا أن نعيد كتابة تاريخنا عبر التضامن والوحدة الجماعية. ومنصة عمل بيجين مع 30 تتمتع بنفس الروح، روح التضامن. ولذلك اليوم نجتمع كأفراد كمنظمات للتفكير في التقدم الذي أحرزته دولنا ومنطقتنا منذ اعتماد منصة عمل بيجين عام 1995. En juin 2021, j'ai fondé le collectif féministe Nalafem lors du forum Génération Égalité à Paris pour s'assurer que les jeunes féministes disposent d'une plateforme pour demander des comptes aux États membres, aux bailleurs de fonds et aux institutions multilatérales. Nous avons créé Nalafem pour être une plateforme décoloniale, panafricaine, multigénérationnelle et féministe, pour faire bouger les choses, surtout en rapport à la fragmentation des espaces de programmation, de plaidoyer et de financement pour les jeunes féministes. Cette consultation me rappelle le Baraza d'Afrique du Nord que nous avons organisé en 2020, pendant les temps difficiles de la pandémie, nous avons mobilisé 1500 jeunes d'Afrique et de la diaspora à travers une série de consultations qui a abouti au manifeste des jeunes femmes africaines et qui a abouti aussi aux 10 revendications politiques fortes. Donc aujourd'hui, vraiment, l'objectif, c'est de poursuivre cette dynamique. Je vous encourage à partager vos expériences au niveau national, continental, au niveau des Nations Unies, partagez vos expertises sur le sujet, partagez vos aspirations en tant que jeunes. Soyez honnêtes, critiques et orientés vers les solutions. Nous devons nous assurer que la déclaration politique qui sera publiée aux Nations Unies au mois de mars vraiment reflète les aspirations des jeunes d'Afrique du Nord. On est 208 millions d'habitants, dont la moitié sont des femmes. Nous devons négocier en tant que bloc uni, et cela inclut les voix des jeunes Africains et des jeunes féministes de tout le continent. J'espère que ce rassemblement marque le début d'un engagement plus profond au sein de la région d'Afrique du Nord, et on s'engage en tant que Nalafem et nos partenaires à développer cette plateforme avec vous. Je vous remercie.
شكرا آية التي أكدت طبعا على أهمية تعزيز وحضور صوت شمال إفريقيا في مسار بكين 30 وأكدت أيضا على أن الإعلان السياسي الذي سيتم اعتماده في مارس يجب أن يضم كل أصوات إفريقيا بما في ذلك الجمعيات والحركات النسوية الإفريقية بما في ذلك شمال إفريقيا، إضافة إلى التأكيد على أهمية الاندماج والوحدة الإفريقية، وأن هذا الجيل الشباب يصنع تاريخ جديد عبر التضامن والوحدة، وتدعو الجميع إلى التفكير الجماعي في التقدم التي أحرزتها بلادنا في شمال إفريقيا، وكذلك التطرق إلى الإشكاليات والمقترحات وتبادل الخبرات والممارسات الفضلى. شكرا سيدة آية. إذا ننتقل الآن إلى كلمة السيدة هاجة الشريف من ليبيا.
شكرا كريمة. أول شيء شكرا للجميع، ومتأسفة أنا النت هلبة ضعيف عندي فمش قادرة نحط الفيديو، ولكن مرة تانية شكرا كريمة، شكرا آية، شكرا لنالفم، وشكرا لكل المنظمات والمجموعات والشركاء في تنظيم اللقاء المهم هذا. أول شيء حابة نبدأ الاجتماع هذا على الأقل كلمتي بدعوة صريحة وواضحة لأهمية وقف إطلاق النار فوراً في غزة ولبنان، وأهمية إيقاف جميع أشكال العنف في المنطقة وفي العالم بصفة عامة. الحقيقة في وجهة نظري أن ما نقدروش نتكلموا على المشاكل معينة، المساواة بين الجنسين، تمكين المرأة والشابات، ونشاركوا في المراجعة الدولية لإعلان ومنهاج عمل بيجين بعد 30 سنة أو 30 وما بعد، والقانون الدولي الإنساني كل يوم يتم انتهاكه. وللأسف أغلب العالم والقوة الدولية، المنظومة الدولية نفسها مش قادرة توقف انتهاكات صارخة لحقوق الإنسان اللي قاعدين كل يوم نشوفوا فيها. لأن حقيقة أنا نطرح على نفسي سؤال، شنو فايدة الإطار الدولي للمساواة بين الجنسين مثل بيجين لو القانون الدولي الإنساني اللي هو ملزم قانونيا لا يتم احترامه ويتم فقط تطبيقه بشكل اختياري؟ لو ما نقدروش نضمنوا أهمية حماية المدنيين الأبرياء اللي منهم النساء والشابات اللي احنا نتكلم عليهم اليوم، إذا يعني هذا شيء نشوف فيه مبدئي لازم ما يكون موجود في صلب النقاش. وبالنسبة لي أنا هذا شيء مهم حتى نتأكد شخصيا، وأكيد هذا في رأي الكل، أن مشاركتنا في إجراءات تحت المنظومة الدولية مثل بيجين ما تكونش مشاركة تعزز المعايير المزدوجة، لأن للأسف المعايير المزدوجة ما زالت موجودة من ضمن المنظومة الدولية اللي احنا من ضمنها اليوم. لذلك في وجهة نظري ونتمنى أن اليوم تكون مساحة النقاش حول بيجين 30 وما بعد تكون مساحة آمنة، تكون مساحة صادقة، تكون مساحة للتفكير في دورنا كجزء من المنظومة الدولية اللي مراجعة إعلان بيجين ومنهاج بيجين جزء منها. نتمنى أن تكون ومتأكدة أن هذه هتكون فرصة قوية للتغيير الحقيقي. نتمنى أن احنا نستغل اللقاء اليوم أن تكون مساحة للتفكير، وأنا عجبني الكلام اللي قلتيه آية، بحيث تكون مساحة للتفكير كيف بيجين ممكن تكون منصة تحمي حقوق كل النساء والشابات بغض النظر على مكان وجودهم، بغض النظر على عرقهم، أصلهم، دينهم، عمرهم وغيرها، وأن تكون منصة المنظومة الدولية نتعامل فيها بشكل متساوي، نكون متساويين في الكرامة، نكون متساويين في الحقوق، ومتساويين في المشاركة. اليوم منطقة شمال أفريقيا مش زي ما كانت من 30 سنة فاتت لما تم اعتماد إعلان بيجين. المنطقة تغيرت بفضل النضالات الكبيرة اللي قامت بها الناشطات والشابات. الشابات اللي هم تحديداً يعرفوا معنى التقاطع الحقيقي بين القضايا، اللي عارفين ومؤمنين أن المشاكل والتحديات كلها مترابطة، أن ما نقدروش نحلوا جزء من القضية إلا لما نواجهوا كل الأجزاء المرتبطة. النساء في المنطقة اليوم وخاصة الشابات واعيين أن الحاضر مربوط بالماضي، وأن المستقبل يعتمد على اللي نديروه اليوم ومبني على شراكة حقيقية بين الأجيال تكون فيها القيادة وصنع القرار بالتشارك بين الأجيال. اللي نشوفه فيه اليوم نشوفه في أن الشابات يكافحوا من أجل الحرية والحقوق المتساوية، وعارفين أن زي ما آية حكيتي لازم نفهموا تاريخنا عشان نعرفوا كيف نمشوا لقدام. المنطقة مرت بظروف ما كانتش تحت سيطرتنا، أولها الاستعمار اللي عاشوه أجدادنا. يعني هذا شيء مهم أن احنا نتكلموا على فترة استعمار مش من 1000 سنة فاتت أو من 100 سنة فاتت، احنا نتكلموا على استعمار أنا جدي عاشه، احنا أجدادنا عاشوه. عشان هيك المشاركة في المنظومة الدولية شيء مهم، لأن لازم نكونوا موجودين ونشاركوا بقوة ونشاركوا على قدر متساوي. ولكن مشاركتنا في وجهة نظري لازم تكون مشاركة يكون فيها صوتنا ورأينا، وأهم شيء قيادتنا في صلب المسار عشان يكون لنا تأثير فعلي. آخر شيء حاب نقوله أن بيجين بالمبدأ ما هياش مجرد إعلان، هي إعلان ومنصة للفعل. وأنا سعيدة أن نشوف أن منصة الفعل بادية اليوم من خلال هذا اللقاء، ونشوف كل المجهودات اللي قايمين عليها جميع الناس اللي موجودين اليوم. شكراً.
شكرا لك سيدة هاجر، طبعا التي أكدت على أهمية وقف إطلاق النار في غزة ولبنان وكل أشكال العنف في المنطقة. طبعا بالتأكيد على أنه لا يمكن التحدث عن المساواة في إطار مراجعة منهاج عمل بيجين بدون التحدث عن إعمال القانون الدولي الإنساني الذي يتم انتهاكه. أيضا على أهمية حماية المدنيين من بينهم النساء والشابات التي يتأثرن بهذه الحروب. يجب أن يكون هذا الموضوع في صلب النقاشات والمقترحات التي ستنجم عن هذه الاستشارة. طبعا أن هذا الإعلان يعد منصة، ليس إعلانا فقط ولكن منصة للعمل. لذلك أكدت السيدة هاجر على أن مساحة النقاش يجب أن تكون صادقة آمنة للتفكير في أدوار كل هذه المنظمات وكذلك الحركات النسوية في شمال إفريقيا في المنظومة الدولية، وهذا يعد فرصة للتغيير في هذا الإطار. إذن الآن أعطي الكلمة إلى السيدة ياسمين بن سليمان من المغرب.
Hello, everyone. I'm so honored to stand before you today as part of this powerful, resilient community of North African feminists and allies. And I stand here knowing the strength, the resilience, and the courage that each of you embodies, that our ancestors passed us We are here because we believe in the possibility of a world where gender equality is a reality. For too long, North feminist activists, especially North African feminist activists, especially young feminists, have been pushed to the sidelines, have been pushed to the margins of discussions on gender equality. We've been told our voices are not strategic enough, or that we're too loud, or that our priorities don't align with the agendas that are set by those who sit far from our realities. So today, what we're saying is we don't need anyone's permission. We are not waiting for a seat at the table. We are building our own tables, and we're inviting all of you to share this vision. North African youth are a driving force for change. We've seen it through the revolution of dignity. We see it every single day. We bring fresh ideas. We bring diverse perspectives. We bring courage, the courage to challenge systems that for far too long have oppressed us for generations. Our voices and our stories are powerful, and they deserve to be at the center, not on the sidelines. So today, through this beautiful collaborative efforts, we're here to ensure that our voices, our experiences, and our priorities are part of the Beijing+30 process and beyond. Because we truly need to believe in ourselves. We need to remind ourselves daily that we are enough, that we are powerful, that our vision is not just a possibility, but a necessity, that every barrier that we face, every battle that we face to, every ceiling that we shatter, it brings us closer to a world where, as young Africans, we are able to lead without fear, without limitation, without anyone telling us no. In the face of exclusion, we're creating solidarity across spaces, across networks, and across the continent as a whole. And we are here committed to supporting one another, to creating safe spaces for young women and young people in all their diversity, wherever they are, whether in North Africa or in the diaspora. Everyone can engage meaningfully, exchange ideas, drive accountability, because it's not just about our representation, it's about reshaping those systems that are working against us so that they can work for us. And our vision is bold and it's ambitious, and it's exactly what the world needs right now. And while we face many challenges, and we will keep on facing challenges, at least we're not alone. We're gathered here, united across borders and throughout the entire continent of Africa. We are connected by a common purpose, and we're determined to dismantle an unfair system. So to each one of you, young feminists here today, trust in your power. Remember that every step you take, every ceiling you break, it's a victory, not just for you, but for everyone that comes after you as well. So a reminder that this is our time. We don't have to ask for permission. This is our right to be included in every step of decision-making processes. So make yourselves heard. And thank you so much for being here.
شكرا ياسمين على هذا الخطاب الحماسي ويعني القوي والمؤثر. أكدت على أننا فعلا لا نحتاج إلى مقعد في الطاولة، لكننا نصنع ونؤسس طاولتنا. صوت الشباب والشابات هو قوي ومؤثر، ولا نحتاج يعني رخصة من أحد لكي نفعل مشاركتنا. نحن هنا لنتقاسم التجارب، ونريد أن نذكر أنفسنا أننا نقود بدون خوف ونخلق مساحات وبيئات آمنة للنساء والفتيات من أجل المشاركة والانخراط وتعزيز دورنا في الترافع والمساءلة. شكرا لك سيدة ياسمين من المغرب. الآن أعطي، لا أعرف إذا السيدة سعيدة أقريبي موجودة معنا. إذن سأنتقل إلى السيدة سيمون لتعطينا فكرة عامة عن إعلان بيجين وعن مسار هذه المراجعة. سيدتي تفضلي.
Thank you, Karima. First of all, let me say, a huge thank you to Nalafem for inviting me to your table. And at your table, I've been asked to share with you one of very many processes about the Beijing+30 regional review in the Arab states. So my name's Simone Ellis Oluwacholunya, and I work in the UN Women Regional Office, which is based in Egypt, and it covers 17 member states. Some, of course, are on the African continent and several are not. We do not cover all of the Arab states on the African continent in this particular regional office. So what I'm going to share with you is the regional review process from a normative perspective. And this is in partnership with a regional economic commission, which for this area is ESQUA. And I'm also going to share with you our journey with some civil society in this process. Please bear in mind that, as I said, there are multiple intersecting levels of the regional review process. So I'm giving you a snapshot. You will be able to get my details from Aya if you want to follow up on any specificities following my presentation. So our journey began in, I believe, June of 2023. And officially, in this particular process, it will end in March 2025. We will hold our final consultation in December of this year as a regional body. So who are we? Well, according to the processes, the normative processes, the United Nations mandated the regional economic commissions to make the arrangements of a regional review process on Beijing+30 implementation after 30 years, obviously, and that will produce a regional report that is informed by a series of consultations with diverse interest groups. The UN Women produce every Beijing periodic 5-year review a guidance note, and that guidance note is shared with member states to explain to them the process of preparing a national report. And from the national reports, the information is gathered to inform the regional report, which is the one I just referred to that is produced by ESQUA in collaboration with UN Women. Now, it is one of the most fundamental aspects of the guidance note that any national Beijing report is produced in a consultative manner, meaning that government is encouraged to engage in consultations with civil society, academia, private sector, so on and so forth, in order to inform their national report. So I would kindly ask my colleague just to beam the pathway PPT. Thank you. And as you will see, there are a number of date points, and those date points indicate which dialogue was conducted. I won't go through all of them, but what I will explain to you now is that there are multiple tiers to those dialogues. So the one is with ESQUA UN Women member states. Second is UN Women Regional Office with civil society, and I'll speak to that. And then the third one, if you could scroll down to, thank you. And the third one is UN Women Global and her process through the JEF of consulting with civil society. So I want to share with you that those regional dialogues included different interest groups such as the elderly, youth, women with disabilities, parliamentarians, national human rights institutions, and of course government, the National Women's Machinery, Bureau of Statistics, etc. And after each of those consultations, an outcome document was produced. And I will also give you the link to those outcome documents. And then the most critical one, if you could just scroll down, oh no, actually you're fine where you are, September. September 3 to 4 in Amman. Usually these regional meetings are held in Beirut, but obviously circumstances did not allow that. That was a regional expert group meeting. And in that expert group meeting, it is a representation of participants who attended some of the previous dialogues. Therefore, when they come to the expert group meeting to review the draft regional report, they come from a position whereby they have already engaged in these processes and are familiar with the work that we have produced, the outcome documents. I would also like to emphasize that at that expert group meeting, the member states were very key and critical on one particular point when they were reviewing the regional draft report. And that links to, I believe it's Hadja, her comments on peace and security, ceasefire, the situation that's currently taking place. And from that consultation, they very strongly requested a revision in the draft report where there is a stronger emphasis on the conflict that is taking place, its impact on development, and of course, its proposed solution from the perspective of the Arab states regions. Now, if you could just scroll to the second. Beautiful, thank you. Please ignore this. It says 10 to 11. It's not the 10th of December, it's the 9th of December. So on the 9th of December, we will hold a high-level meeting in Oman. And in that meeting, the member states will have the opportunity to endorse the regional report, the one that they reviewed in the expert group meeting. That meeting will also involve civil society who participated in the previous processes that I shared with you just now. And once that report is endorsed and finalized, it will then be shared with the world, but more critically at the CSW 69 in New York in March. And that will basically be the region's position on implementation of the Beijing after 30 years. So that describes the ESCWA UN member state civil society track. I now very briefly, because I believe I'm almost out of time, I very briefly want to turn to the UN Women Regional Office track with civil society. And the way in which we manage this process is that we engage in a partnership with the Arab Network and Feminist Civil Society Organization, which has approximately 70 member organizations. It actually increases quite regularly. So let's say more or less 70 from the Arab states region. And in that partnership, which covers a number of aspects, one which is focusing on the amplification of the Arab women's voice in this conflict and women, peace and security, there is a strong and dedicated component on the Beijing. And the civil society organization has followed a parallel or a mirrored the pattern that I just explained to you in the other track, whereby they conduct national consultations with their civil society membership. And from there, they then draw up a draft report. They have held their expert group meeting to review the draft report. And the intention is to launch that report on the 12th of December, probably in Egypt, but that still has to be confirmed. The organization within its body also has a dedicated branch, if you like, which are the young feminists. So the young feminists of that organization feed into the process in terms of their perspective, their views, and the shaping of the report. So I think I will close there, having shared with you a process of actions. And as I close, I want to end on when March comes next year, that is actually the beginning of the journey, because now it's implementing everything that has been agreed over the next 5 years. And that's where the heavy lifting work begins. So thank you very much for your time. I think you can drop down the thank you very much, and I'll hand back to you, Karima.
Thank you so much. إذا قبل أن أعطي المجال لطرح بعض الأسئلة، قبل أن ننتقل إلى العمل المجموعات وهو العمل الرئيسي لهذه الاستشارة، طبعا السيدة سيمون تحدثت عن مسار مراجعة منهاج بكين، طبعا بشراكة مع الإسكوا، وكذلك حتى مسار المراجعة التي اعتمدوها مع بعض جمعيات المجتمع المدني، وتحدثت على أن آخر استشارة ستكون في دجنبر 2024. طبعا تحدثت عن الإطار المعياري ودور اللجنة الاقتصادية الجهوية في تسهيل التقارير الوطنية وكذلك الجهوية بالشراكة مع هيئة الأمم المتحدة للمرأة، وأكدت على أن منهاج المراجعة يطالب كل الحكومات بالتشاور مع كل الفاعلين بما في ذلك جمعيات المجتمع المدني في إطار إعداد التقارير الوطنية. طبعا لديكم في الشات بعض روابط للتقارير الوطنية وبعض الروابط المهمة التي يمكن من خلالها التعرف أكثر على مسار مراجعة منهاج بكين. إذن أخذ بعض الأسئلة قبل أن ننتقل إلى عمل مجموعات، لكن أود أن أؤكد لبعض التساؤلات في منصة تشات أن الترجمة موجودة بالعربية والفرنسية والإنجليزية. يسرى.
Bonjour, alors moi je vais parler en français, je vais être bref. Je vais pas, je vais pas poser de questions, c'est juste une remarque par rapport à la forme de la plateforme et aussi du plan de travail de Pékin+30. Donc moi je travaille sur un rapport parallèle au nom d'une dynamique jeune féministe marocaine qui regroupe plus qu'une vingtaine d'associations collectives et initiatives individuelles ou de groupes au Maroc de jeunes féministes pour la rédaction de Pékin+30. Et notre remarque principale, c'est par rapport sur le volet forme, c'est pourquoi aujourd'hui on parle d'un rapport national avec une vision participative, alors qu'en réalité, ce n'est pas un rapport national qui est soumis dans la plateforme, mais plutôt un rapport officiel. Et donc, sur cette forme-là, déjà, notre positionnement et notre première question par rapport au fait, est-ce qu'aujourd'hui, il y a moyen dans la critique de la plateforme de Pékin et du plan d'action de Pékin, de revoir déjà cette forme-là de rapport national, soit en imposant un participatif plein où ça sera réellement un rapport national avec la participation de toutes les parties prenantes, ou revoir et dire qu'on a un rapport officiel et ouvrir une autre plateforme pour les rapports parallèles et pour les rapports des autres parties, que leur voix n'est pas prise en considération sur ce rapport national. Ça, c'est un volet, ça c'est sur le volet forme. Maintenant, sur le volet fond, je pense que la plateforme de Pékin et le plan d'action de Pékin, comme la plupart des mécanismes, des instruments internationaux de protection des droits humains et surtout des droits des femmes, gardent toujours un langage qui n'est toujours pas inclusif, malheureusement. C'est-à-dire, on parle toujours d'égalité de sexe et non pas d'égalité de genre. On parle toujours de la femme au singulier et pas des femmes au pluriel. Et par rapport à notre portage comme étant jeunes féministes, en tous les cas pour les jeunes féministes marocaines, ce langage nous cause problème parce qu'il n'est pas assez inclusif et il ne représente pas ce que nous sommes comme étant des jeunes féministes dans notre diversité. Donc, en gros, c'est les remarques. Sur le fond, on peut se détailler encore plus, mais je ne voudrais pas prendre plus de temps. Merci.
Thank you, merci. أوكي. هل هناك بعض الأسئلة أو تعقيب على كل ما تم طرحه من مداخلات وكذلك حول مسلسل مراجعة منهاج بكين؟ أود أن أشير إلى أنه من المهم أن هناك العديد من المنظمات المجتمع المدني التي تشارك في هذه الاستشارة، طبعا بكل مشاربها واختصاصاتها، لكن طبعا من المهم تعزيز هذا التلاحم والتلاقح بين الأجيال، خصوصا أن هناك منظمات من الجيل الجديد وهناك منظمات طبعا لديها خبرة في مجال الترافع الدولي، ويجب تضافر الجهود للمشاركة في مثل هذه التقارير الموازية وإسماع صوت شمال إفريقيا في هذه المراجعة الدولية. هل هناك أسئلة أخرى قبل أن ننتقل إلى إذن لم أرى أي رفع الأيدي. Then there's no other question. So I think I will present the breakout rooms. Just a second. Let me point out here that the Beijing Plus regional meeting, there will be a presentation of the youth position paper with the participation of 100 participants. I would like to ask how to include or incorporate and feed into all as North African CSOs from here participating, how to include this voice in the whole process of the Beijing+30.
Karima, is this question to me?
Yes, sorry.
Okay.
I think there was a problem of connection, so I was not. I lost
No
connection.
problem.
Yes, please. Yeah.
No problem. As you have seen from the timeline, the process that we have followed, you have missed that process. Of course, North Africa is included because, as I mentioned, it is one of the member states that we cover at our regional office. Nevertheless, what I would invite you to do, and I'm happy to make the e-introductions, if you are not already a member of the Arab network that I mentioned, I can introduce you to them, and you can also share your work and your statements in October. But because they're not part of the process that I already outlined, we cannot suddenly bring them into that fray. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all this clarification. So I think now we will move on into the breakout rooms. And here we have 6 clusters in 6 working groups. And I will present the themes of each cluster and the name of the facilitator. The first cluster, we have economic empowerment and participation. And the facilitator is Mrs. Amina Suleimani from Nalafem. We have the cluster 2 is women and the environment. And the facilitator is Rania Harara from Swana Climate Sirens. We have cluster 3, women and health. Yes, the facilitator is Yasmina bin Sliman. We have cluster 4, safety and human rights, and the facilitator is Rana Abdelhamid Malika from Safety Center. We have the cluster 5, leadership, representation and culture change, and the facilitator is Wisal Bouchit from YAFC. And the last cluster is the girl child, and the facilitator is Hamida Jridi from YAFC. I think I saw here someone, Anfil Amira, you want to, before we go to break up, let me give you the floor. Anfil Amira.
Yes,
Yeah.
I have a question. Do we have to belong to an organization, or can we just participate as individuals?
Yes, I think
Okay.
so. You can participate as individual. Yeah, exactly. I would like to gently ask the coordinators to move to breakout rooms, and I will leave the floor to the facilitators to lead the conversation. And let me remind you of the time. We have about 33 minutes to discuss the first round in the working group, and then we will come out again in working groups to discuss the recommendations. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. I think it was very, very productive in the groups. I think we need more and more time to discuss because the subjects are interesting. And I think we've been able at least to summarize some of the recommendations from the challenges that we identified during the different groups. So before I give the floor to the different facilitators to give us their top insights and recommendations. And of course, detailed recommendations will fall into the report later, but we will be giving you just the top insights of each cluster. I would like first to give the floor to our distinguished Mrs. Saida Agrebi. As I told you, she's a member of the Economic and Social and Cultural Council of the African Union representing Africa. She has been elected member of the parliament in Tunisia, and she's president of the international NGO Objectif Solidarité, Amitié, Tolérance pour la paix et le mieux vivre ensemble. She was also chairing the African Women Delegation in Beijing in 1995 with the chair Gertrude Mongela, and will be talking to us about Beijing+30 from North Africa. So we will have the opportunity to have her insight as she's been in the process. Mrs. Saida, you have the floor. If you can unmute your mic, Mrs. Saida. Mrs. Saida? Well, I think she has an issue with the mic. Until we solve this issue, let me give the floor to Cluster 1, the facilitator of Cluster 1, to give us the summary of the recommendations from the working group. Mrs. Amina Suleimani, Nalafem, Cluster 1, on women on economic empowerment and participation. You have the floor.
Thank you, Karima. So in our group, there was really a very significant concern around first taking pregnant women out of the formal economy during their pregnancies, and the lack of regulations and laws that would protect them during that particular period. So that was a major concern. The second one is I would say the contradiction that may happen to a lot of youth-led NGOs who would eventually get a lot of pressure from the government when it comes to their funding sources, and this especially under authoritarian regimes. So I think there's a big recommendation towards finding ways to protect NGOs who would eventually be producing knowledge that goes against the people they're being ruled under. When it comes to economic inclusion for women entrepreneurs, there's a clear need for establishing equity and quota systems to allow them to raise funds and to help them move career-wise. The other one is in regards to this is a very specific one to the Egyptian government and the need for adopting transparent reporting practices that can show progress on gender equality with input from independent oversight bodies and public forums. So this was a significant recommendation for accountability. So these are the major significant outcomes from our breakout room. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amina. I don't know if Mrs. Saida is ready. Mrs. Saida? I think she still have an issue with the mic. So let's move to the cluster 2, Women and Environment, Mrs. Rania Harara from Swana Climate Science.
Actually, I will be taking the floor as Rania has also had a problem with her connection. But yes, I will update you all on what we discussed in the Women and Environment cluster in terms of recommendations. So our recommendations were a bit more specific to the context that we discussed, which were Mauritania and Libya, but we still agreed on a couple of points, which is regarding supporting women be independent and have income and livelihoods that are related to their environment. So supporting agricultural or like livestock projects, providing grants, providing training, providing innovative techniques for them to do these projects and make sure that they are connected to the environment, that they can use the resources that they have around them. Which is very important because we had examples of people not being able to produce things or not be able to market things. So another recommendation would be to create networks and collaborations between people in these rural areas working in agriculture, for example, with urban zones in order to market their products and in order to gain their livelihoods from it. The other thing is also to provide awareness, especially for youth and for anyone who has not had adequate citizenship awareness. So to create a bond between the people and their countries and their environments, and to make sure that they respect it, that they protect it from pollution, from any other hazards that can take place. So yeah, the issue of lack of awareness or lack of understanding of the effect of all individuals or of the responsibility as a citizen has been one of the things that we discussed a lot. So yeah, people could be educated about this in schools from the very beginning until the end. of their schooling experience. There are many different environmental phenomena that they can start addressing from an individual perspective. Yeah, that's what we discussed.
Okay, thank you so much. And then I will move to Mrs. Yasmina bin Sliman, Cluster 3, Women and Health. You have the floor.
Hello, I'm Radwa Hosni because Yasmina actually has a technical issue. So during our conversation, actually we addressed like the topic of women and health, and actually we had a great conversation. So we have here there is a significant lack of research, particularly in the fields of reproductive health and violence against women, especially in obstetrics and gynecology, which is obstetric violence. Furthermore, there are no laws protecting women regarding women's health issues, and there are no laws regulating abortion in the region, except in Tunisia. There are still practices of virginity testing, which are considered barbaric and unjustified acts that affect women's mental health, not just physical health. In addition, there is a lack of health awareness of sexual education. Moreover, there are forms of gender-based violence, such as female genital mutilation, particularly carried out by medical professionals. Alongside this, there is medical bias in diagnosis against women, as their complaints are often regarded as more psychological than physical. Then, when it comes to the progress, actually, progress is somewhat present regarding practices like female genital mutilation, but the establishment of policies doesn't necessarily mean they are effectively implemented. We can adopt the experience of Latin America concerning reproductive health. And Tunisia can be considered a successful model in the region. Perhaps the best progress has been highlighting women's health issues in recent times, as well as women's issues in general. In our opinion, there hasn't been as much focus on health overall compared to women's health specifically. However, some initiatives have recently started to emerge, and we can say that awareness is on the rise. And for youth-led solutions, we discussed that youth should be integrated into all discussions related to this issue to make decisions, and it's crucial that their decisions are implemented in practice rather than remaining mere ink on paper without any tangible action. Social media platforms are important tools for digital advocacy in collaboration with many colleagues in the region. They even play a role in expediting judgments and increasing penalties for crimes against women, making them a significant weapon in reason awareness. And for collaborative policy efforts, we should collaborate with the international community to fund initiatives, as well as work with the government sector to facilitate the enactment of laws that enhance women's participation. Additionally, the private sector should provide jobs and opportunities for women to support and empower them. To sum up for our recommendations, we have that actually awareness, especially for the emerging younger generation, is crucial and quintessential and should be achieved through advertisements. It's important to emphasize the necessity of monitoring all decisions made to ensure their implementation in practice. There should be space for feminists in the region to shape their roles appropriately and to enhance their participation and collaboration, raising awareness of the roles they play concerning the Beijing Declaration. In addition to increasing research on women's health through funding, which is so essential, there should also be international oversight on governance mechanisms to enforce supportive laws for women. even the number of women in leadership positions within the health sector should increase, as women are always responsible for driving change. And finally, there should be a focus on making progress on women's rights overall, as any advancement in this area will undoubtedly contribute to improving women's health in general.
Thank you. Thank you. So now we'll move to cluster 4 on safety and human rights. And I would like to give the floor to Mrs. Rana Abdelhamid, Malika Safety Center. You have the floor.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rana Abdelhamid. I am the executive director of Malika. I'm also with Nalafem. Our group was pretty diverse. We had participation from someone in Sudan, Morocco, Tunisia, and we were able to really think about what are some of the challenges that our communities are confronted with, including both the impact that conflict has on the status of refugees, asylum seekers, and internally displaced people, as well as the ways in which oftentimes, even if legislation is enacted, it might not be implemented in a way that is most effective. A lot of our recommendations really centered around ensuring intersectionality when it comes to women's safety, that women's safety isn't just concerned with the reality of and the manifestation of domestic violence, which is a very serious issue, but also women's safety is a concern when it comes to, for example, climate change or climate crisis. When there is disaster and women are displaced, their safety is often at risk. Or, for example, when they are undocumented and they are migrants crossing borders, their safety is also at risk. And so our recommendations were focused on making sure that all of the recommendations have a lens on women's safety, which is oftentimes overlooked in different issue areas and themes. We also talked a lot about what are the metrics and evaluations that are being used to ensure whether or not a policy that is being implemented around women's safety actually has the teeth to be effective and is actually having the impact on the ground. So making sure that whatever policy recommendations and changes we're proposing also have clear evaluation mechanisms so that we understand that if it's effective or not moving forward.
Thank you, Rana. Then moving now to cluster 5 on leadership, representation, and call for change. And I would like to give the floor to Mrs. Wissal Bouchid from YAFC. You have the floor.
Thank you. So, hello everyone. My name is Wissal Bouchid, and I'm from Morocco, and I'm a member of the Young Arab Feminist Coalition. So our cluster was about leadership, representation, and cultural change. We didn't have a lot of people. We were like 3, but it was effective. So our group discussed the main challenges holding women back from leadership in North Africa. Cultural and social barriers often silence women's voices. And even though there are rules like gender quotas, they don't always work to truly support women's needs. So many areas still hold into these patriarchal views, and women face issues like racism and discrimination that keep them from fully participating in society. So we talked about online spaces, which could be empowering, but often become places of harassment and making it difficult for women to freely share their opinions. So we gave like some recommendation. So to truly uplift women's leadership, we need safe digital spaces where women can speak out and feel supported. And there is also a big need for workshops to help women gain skills in leadership and activism, as many aren't familiar with important frameworks like the Beijing Declaration that could support their work. And the other recommendation is to build strong partnership across sectors to continue advancing feminist goals, especially by creating safe and supportive digital platforms. So together we can break down these barriers and ensure that women's leadership is valued and visible in all spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, Wisal. Then we will be moving to the last and sixth cluster on the girls' child. And I would like to give the floor to Mrs. Hamida Jridi from the same organization. Hamida.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, Hamida again from the Young Arab Feminist Coalition. I also was on the discussion about environment, but we combined them. So the discussion that we had about the girl child was important because we addressed things like the early marriage and the feelings of like lack of safety and basically the traditional behaviors that we've had with girl children in the region. Thankfully, not many of them are still present. Many of them have been already eradicated, but some of them are re-emerging considering the new context. So we talked about a few recommendations, which in general, the idea is we address root causes. So, for example, early marriage happening in some parts of Libya because of the armed conflict, because of the feeling of lack of safety, because the families think that there will be other worse scenarios that can happen to their little girls. And so they would choose to go for that type of tradition. So it's important to address the root cause to make sure that the girls and women in the community feel safe, that they are not feeling like they have to be married to someone to feel more protected or to feel like they will not go through other worse experiences like kidnapping or trafficking or rape and other cases. It's also important to address another root cause, which is the lack of information about the legal framework. And so providing information on the current legal framework, which will build resilience in the community against changing the current status quo, which is protective of women or girls. So it's very important to know what the rights are to make sure that they are always protected and that there aren't any political regimes that will work against that and change the legal framework. In another recommendation, specifically to the context of Mauritania, we talked about how it is important to raise awareness about the roles of men and women and of them being complementary, not in competition, because it's one of the key aspects that help build a more healthy society, which will protect, of course, women and girls at a later stage if their understanding and if their well-being is taken into consideration, of course. So early marriage can be addressed through our recommendations if we address the root causes again, which is lack of information, a lack of resilience towards the current legal framework, which is protective of the girls and women, specifically in the context of Libya that we talked about, and also the root cause of displacement, because this happened because some communities have left their places of origin and went somewhere else, and they had to deal with remnants of armed conflict or tribal conflicts, and they needed more feelings of safety. So if we address the root cause of displacement, which is the armed conflict or the misunderstandings happening in different areas, we could create a safer society and environment for the girl child. That's it from our cluster. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for all these recommendations and insights, and I'm sure that a detailed report and priorities will fall into the report. So here, I think the young feminist priorities will be identified and drafted into the North Africa Youth Beijing+30 declaration that will be certainly shared with UN Women, the African Union, and the Bureau of the 69th session of the CSW. Thank you so much for all your insights, participation, comments, reflections, and also good recommendations. I think with that, we cannot move to the closing without moving again to give the floor to Mrs. Saida Agrebi. Again, I will remind that she is a member of the Economic, Social, and Cultural Council of the African Union. She is also president of an international NGO, Objectif Solidarité, Amitié, Tolérance pour la paix et le mieux vivre ensemble. She has been elected member of the parliament, and I would recall that she was chairing the African delegation in Beijing in 1995 with a chair, Gertrude Mongela, and she will give us her insight because she's been in the process and she's been representing North Africa. She will give us her insight on North Africa. So, ma'am, you have the floor.
Can everybody hear now?
Yeah.
Okay. Mrs. Saida, you can go ahead.
They can hear me?
Yes.
Should I repeat what I said?
Yes, please.
Okay. I said I'm very happy to participate online in this very interesting meeting about North African young women on Visio. And when I remember with the pride that 30 years ago, I was leading the African women delegation to Beijing, and we were about 1,000 women, and we were in the African tent. And I was so proud that women from all over North Africa, East, West, South, and Central, presenting Africa. But unfortunately, there weren't many young women. We had about the same age, all of us. But the meeting of 4 days ago in Addis Ababa, Beijing+30, I was very proud to notice that there were young women and young men. So it's good to transmit what we lived through these 30 years in the platform of action of Beijing, the CEDAW, and all the recommendations. We need to give to transmit to our young women and our young men. So what happened in North Africa was present. And I'm very pleased of the achievement that North Africa, from Mauritania to Morocco, from Algeria to Libya to Tunisia, there is a big achievement for women's rights, mainly legally and socially. There are many steps for women empowerment in our region. And 80% all over, it should be 102. When I noticed that the health, reproductive health of women and young women is improving a lot in our North Africa region. So I think that in 30 years, we can compare on the legal basis or the social basis or education basis or environment or whatever. The role of African women is noticeable, and I'm proud of it. In Addis Ababa a few days ago, we were proud to share the achievement in all the sub-regions of Africa. There is a lot to do more, but all together, and especially with you young girls coming from North Africa, we are going to succeed thanks to you, because you have more advantages than ourselves. You have the artificial intelligence, and when you are advanced in ICT, in digital, the digital gap is less than in our period 30 years ago. So I think when we meet together, we women from all Africa, because I love to say Africa is one. I don't like that we divide Africa by sub-region, because we are in one same continent. and we have the same objectives for our women empowerment, and we have the same vision, even though we might differ in some point of view, but still we are African women and proud. And I believe that you youngsters, you young women and young men, you can follow up what we started, because we did a lot in 30 years. And Beijing conference were the best tent. We were five tent, American, African, European, Asian. The most active, visited by first ladies, was the African tent. And all African women came from all over Africa. And we shared, and we made our recommendation, and we participated in the platform of action. And I was very happy to see Mama Mangala, Gertrude Mangala, was the first time in 1995 to be the General Secretary Assistant of United Nations and to be the chairperson for the Beijing conference. It was a big pride that an African woman like Mama Mangala chaired the whole Beijing process. So I was very happy to see her in Addis Ababa, and we were happy to hear the achievement and to notice that many steps went forward, but we still need more. And I believe that you young women and young men can help reach all the objectives before 2030, the achievement of the SDGs. I thank you. If you want to ask me question, because I was messed up with the preparation for the conference, be free to ask me, and I am very happy that North African youngsters, young women and young men are active like their brothers and sisters in all Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Saida. Certainly, this is an important intergenerational conversation, and we thank you so much for participating with us, and we'd like to learn more about your experience, especially that you represent in North Africa in this process. And certainly, you mentioned that legal and social basis have seen a lot of progress, and you've been witnessing the progress in the role of African women in the past 30 years. And you specified that there's still more to do, but together we can. And we would like to ask you an important question. What is your advice to the young activists and feminists who are into the process and who are aspiring to be engaged in the process for Beijing+30?
Sorry, Karima, we just lost Ms. Saida for a second. Could you just repeat the question?
Okay. So I just said that this is important intergenerational conversation, and we would like to...
Karima, do you hear me?
Yes, yes, I hear you. Do you hear me? Do you hear me?
Karima.
Yes, I hear you.
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes, yes.
Karima?
Yes, I hear you. Do you hear me? Can I repeat the question? Let me write the question in the chat if you don't hear me. Hello, do you hear me?
To be very proud of being feminist and of feeling that you are equal and that nothing could stop you to move ahead, and that you should try everything possible. You should participate, and you should share and transmit with your brothers and sisters of the same age and of the same continent. That's help a lot to move ahead. Did you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mrs.
Are
Saida,
you
for...
Karima or Reem? I don't see it.
I hear you. Thank you, Mrs. Saida,
Okay.
for these important advices for
Karima,
young...
you got me.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for your advices to young feminists. And I think now it's time to move to the closing of this important conversation. And I think we wanted to discuss more. It's more attractive to talk about these important subjects that touches us personally and touches our countries and the advancement of women's rights and girls' rights. So I would like to give now the floor to our last speaker for a closing remark, Mrs. Jivika Shiv. I hope I pronounced your name correctly, and I apologize if I did not. She's an intersectional feminist from India with qualifications in political science, social work, and law, bringing over 14 years of extensive experience in feminist movement, building gender, youth, and feminist leadership, accountability, human rights, and criminal justice. She has worked with leading international organizations, including the World Health Organization, Southeast Asia Regional Office, as part of the gender team, focusing on preventing sexual exploitation and abuse. And she worked also with the Global Fund for Women and has also served as a program advisor with several youth and women's rights organizations. And also she served also as a consultant for UN Women and other types of organizations. Thank you so much for being with us, and I will give you the floor for a closing remarks. You have the floor.
Thank you, Karima, and thank you for moderating today to really bring in an intersectional, intergenerational voice and working around tech and its challenges. First, I want to thank Nalafem and all the other young feminist organizations and networks in the region for really bringing together this space to think about who's missing in the dialogue and putting North Africa on the map. And I, as an ally and a young feminist ally from the past, I really think that these spaces are crucial. And today I speak on behalf of the Feminist Movements and Leadership Action Coalition as the convener at UN Women to say that this is the kind of the conversations that we need to move from these civil society organization spaces and networks to actual formal spaces. And kudos to you, Aya, for sort of like bringing this in, but also other less known voices like Radwa, Yasmina, all of you who've been working back end to do this. I think it's really crucial, some of the conversations today, right from the environment to economics, to also the cross-cutting theme of feminist leadership, more broad-based than just women's leadership, and also looking at invisibilized issues, both of the region, but also of the war, and many a war and many exclusions that we need to amplify. So thank you everyone for being here. And FML, of course, full support to those voices who don't come in. We do have some governments who specifically wanted to send a message, including the governments. We have Malawi from Africa, we have Canada on the thing, who really feel like voices who aren't able to reach mainstream consultations. Like Simon said, some of the consultations are over. How do we keep amplifying? Because I think Beijing is just one touch point, but there is also a global and a local need to localize Beijing and look at what does it mean for our organizations, resourcing them, our communities, and those who are most marginalized. So this would be an invitation to keep this conversation, perhaps as invited by my colleague Simon, to take this to the Arab Regional Office, but also to the Africa consultation that some of you went to, but also bring it global as the youth consultations increase and both in person and virtually we do more, but also hold the line at the time of the pushback and we see regression on gender equality. It's a call to the region which has seen many a recent revolution and push forwards to actually speak more and take more space. As you said, thank you for creating the table instead of sitting at the table, and maybe continue to do that. But it's also a call to perhaps write down all that we spoke about today and take it to different regions and both amplify movements and feminist leaders who are really holding the line. I'm happy to collaborate more with you on this in the coming days, but also to say that to actually make it accessible Thank you to the interpreters who really at short notice sort of pulled in both French and Spanish, and we continue to hope that this comes in. And a big shout out to Nalafem for sort of putting this together and being patient while we work on our internal processes beyond the formal processes as UN Women to try and bring in new voices, older voices who are still marginalized. And we hope that this space gives us a chance to look at the Beijing 25 manifesto and generation equality commitments and to go further and not go back from that. And excited to see what emerges from this written declaration for North Africa. And I hope we continue to amplify that much more as well. Yeah, over to you, Karima, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, and thank you, everyone, for all your insights. Thank you for bringing the voices of North Africa into this conversation. Thank you, Nalafem, for bringing together all these wonderful ladies who brought very, very important recommendations into the process. And of course, feel free to reach out to facilitators at nalafem.org. Definitely, they will be following up with you on all the recommendations that will feed into the report. I will be giving maybe the last word to Aya.
Oh, no need. I mean, you guys did justice to the closing, and Jivika, thank you so much. And all the facilitators, shout out. Pulling this together in such a short time, it just shows the commitment of young feminists. So huge, huge gratitude. And as I said in the chat, we will follow up. We want this to be the beginning of a hub that we will grow together, a platform that we will grow together to make sure that the voices of young feminists of North Africa are part of the Africa position, are part of the Africa conversation. So I hope you really had good discussions, and I look forward to continue collaborating with everyone. Thank you, Karima, for being amazing.
Thank you so much. And don't forget to copy all the links that have been posted on the chat. So you will have more insight on the process of Beijing+30. Thank you so much, and see you soon.